It's been quite a week on the premier current affairs show on radio, Deep Dive on Capital 100.4 FM with Rumbidzai Venge.
But the one thing that we cannot stop doing is conceptualizing, is thinking, is growing, and even sitting down and doing nothing is something. Somebody said that to me once.
The Deep Dive with Rumbidzai Venge, Monday to Thursday, 6 to 9 p.m. The premier current affairs show on radio.
The Exchange on Deep Dive.
This evening on The Exchange, we will be unpacking the very, very, I think, highly publicized amendments to the deeds regulations. So we will be getting into this conversation, and I am to be joined in the conversation by Rejoice Ngwenya and Eddy Cross. So I've got Rejoice on the line to start us off, and we are still trying to get a hold of our second guest. All right, so starting things off, we are joined in the conversation by Rejoice Ngwenya of Komaliso. It is a good evening, Mr. Ngwenya, and welcome. Always good to have you on the show, Rejoice.
Thank you very much, Rumbi. I'm just kind of like petrified because I'm not used to talking to you without looking at you and seeing and moderating your emotions. That's fine, yeah.
I know. You robbed us of your presence in the studio this evening.
Well, I know, yeah.
So I mean, this is quite an interesting development, and I'm talking, of course, of the enactment of Statutory Instrument 76 of 2025 that presents a few notable changes to the last regulations of 2018. So there are some material changes, and we'll talk about the impact there too. So to start us off, perhaps a look at the prevailing situation that gave rise to amendments. In your view, and from a Komaliso perspective, what was the status quo of title deed registration in Zimbabwe that gave rise to these amendments before we even get into what some of the things that are changing will be?
Well, look, earlier this year, thanks very much, Rumbi. Earlier this year, we convened, probably not even this year, late last year, a conference where we brought together experts on the title deed process. And we had a strong feeling after our research that there was a lot of turbulence in the market about the insecurity. There were several cases that we flagged in our program where there's been widespread fraud which involves title deeds. Some of it which was so dauntingly, accurate that you would actually wonder how did even somebody, discover that this title deed is fraudulent. And there was a general consensus that it's a collaborative, it's a criminal gang, which runs through conveyancers, the deeds office and so forth. So, but by then, I'm glad to say that the Ministry of Justice had already committed itself at relooking at the security system of the title deeds. And as you know, that our friends at Kwangu Kwame Trust, that's Eddy Cross and Ido, they had already been given a mandate to set up a very digitalized value chain in order to not just minimize possibility of fraud, but also to speed up the process. The analog system was so archaic. I mean, if you went to the deeds office, Rumbi, you would see some of the files down on the floor. And when you want to check some deeds, you go through a mound of. It was almost impossible to figure it out how our campaign to have to speed up the process of title deeds in hitherto unprotected areas like Airport, Highfields and Luveve. It was not going to be easy if we reverted to our old analog system. So Mr. Mshai and his boss, PS Secretary Wimbai, but they actually committed themselves. That's why it was easy for Kwangu Kwame Trust to convince the government to look for partnership to ensure that the value chain is not only fruitful, but it is processed faster and to minimize fraud and also ensure that Zimbabwe gets onto the digital, wavelength. And I'm excited about it, Rundi, about this process.
So it comes from a place of consultations having been done, if I get you right, and taking in of the commonly faced issues with fraudulent deeds, leading in loss of hard-earned money and all the anxiety that comes with the process. So this is a triumph, if I'm getting you correctly. You are pleased that these things have actually made their way into this statutory instrument.
Well, look, there's no system that's totally foolproof, but just maybe to enlighten the listeners that the process of title deeds, we were at Komaliso, we wanted to try and simplify it, but because of the law, the law is very clear that it follows certain processes, and the heart and soul of title deeds is the conveyancer, which means nobody can just go to the deeds office and say, "Hi, I bought a house in Highfield. I want this." You've got to go through a process which involves the conveyancers, which we just normally call them lawyers. And these conveyancers are not just, they are special people that are registered by the Law Society of Zimbabwe. And even estate agents, they have to go through that process. So if we were busy harping about title deed security and the importance of secure tenure and all that, and then the central government and Law Society and deeds office then say, look, we want to securitize these things by ensuring that they're digital and foolproof, then obviously it's a eureka moment for us. But as you say, we just hope that there was widespread consultation to make sure that even that digital system itself is impenetrable. But it's a very, very big thing for Zimbabweans. And if securitization is also going to speed up the processes, I think it's going to make a landmark transformation in the way that property ownership is held in Zimbabwe. Mm-hmm. So we are really pleased about that, Rumbi.
Thanks so much, Joyce. So, now diving into the notable changes, you've already, spoken about, I think, the most significant one, which is the validation and digitization of title deeds. And, that was the one that I was also most excited about, and the securitization of deeds as well. But could you just, lay out for our listeners what is being required going forward in terms of Statutory Instrument 76 of 2005? Many people are holding title deeds, that were generated from the time that they got that title. Some of them are even colonial title deeds. So how will the validation and digitization of title deeds work, and what does it mean for title deed holders?
It's a good thing that you mentioned the word colonial, because Rumbi, my phone has not stopped ringing. There are some guys that are phoning me from as far as Kazakhstan, saying, look, I have 2 properties in Harare and 24 months, oh my goodness me, what's going to happen? Am I going to have to lose the other one? I'm like, no, calm down. It is just like transferring your analog bank account system, where, where we used to go and fill up the account number and, where you address your grandmother's, DNA and so forth. So just transferring it into an electronic medium. So the process of acquiring title deeds itself has not changed. I mean, I need to be very clear. It's not like you can just take up a rate clearance card, your Surveyor General's, side funds and all, and just walk to the lawyers and say, can you get this thing digitized? It's not. The actual process itself is relatively the same old process. In other words, in validating your own, personal details. But this system has tightened it a bit to make sure that, there's so many ways of transferring property. And I mean, we don't have enough time to talk about it. Probably if you are buying the stand from government, deed of grant, if, there's these issues of mortgages, of hypothecation. It's so complicated. That's why Mishi wrote a book about it. Actually, he wrote 2 books about it. So it's not an easy way down. But what it simply does is that, the old system was you go through your normal documentation, and it would end up in a file somewhere, hidden somewhere in St. Judas West, in some shelf somewhere. But that's not the case now. As you present as your conveyancer, presents your normal details, the SIN number, your ID, whatever, it's actually digital. It is literally entered into a computer system. So that's the difference. You no longer have to go through your normal, writing of forms and all. But I want to assure our listeners that when there is a transformation of a process, there are bound to be certain complications here and there because lack of understanding. But this has nothing to do with decapitating citizens from their old title deeds. It's not going to work like that. It's your same old title deed. It's like taking them to the office and they validate to check to ensure that these are actually your title deeds, and then they digitalize them. It's a pity this system is a high security system, but if you were to have an inside view, Rumbi, of what's happening on the 2 floors at State House, you are just going to be amazed at what level this whole thing is operating on. But otherwise, the system itself, it's like, you remember when we used to queue for passports for 2 years, now it's 1 day. So digitalization and secularization come with exciting, short cycle for presentation. But the process of actually validating whether or not it's your title deed, the deed of sale, have you transferred, have you paid your rent and all, it's all the same. Mm-hmm. Go through the normal process, yeah.
And I think that's a big thing, because many people said, what does this Section 40 mean? Does this mean they're going to take away my title deed and I'm reissued with a new one? But I'm glad that you've highlighted that. So all holders of old title deeds, we'll call them old for now, must submit them for validation within a 24-month period. And then the next notable change is the securitization of deeds. So after validation, what is this securitization process and why is it so important?
Securitization is actually as simple as it is. It's security. In other words, when you enter your information is your details, your personal details are digitalized. The information is entered into a system, electronic system. But what I've noted is that I think the deeds office and its technical advisors are saying generally people are not comfortable just going back home with their hands in the pocket saying, now I've got my deeds, they've been securitized. All I need to do is get an electronic reference number and so on, and check them online. Of all the pages that have been put together within that system, you are then given page 1, which shows all the necessary information of the SIN number and the seals and all, because that is the only hard copy. In other words, if something is securitized, it does not mean that you cannot have a hard copy. It's like PDF, JPEG, PNG. These are all electronic media, but you can print out anything. So it's entirely up to you. What the system is simply saying is that instead of having your information in some old ring binder file in St. House East, now we have it in some kind of electronic media, whether it's software or it's cloud. I don't know how they store this. It's their secret how they actually store the information. Because once they start telling us how they store it, there are some people that are clever enough, some geeks and nerds that can be able to pounce on them. So your information is now digital. That's like if you book a ticket, right? You get an electronic ticket, Rumbi. But if you want to print out your boarding pass or your ticket, you can still print it out. But it's actually digitalized.
Thank you so much for that, Rejoice. And it's really quite clear. I think a lot of people had issues around that. Does it mean my title deed is being taken away? But we are now connecting with Mr. Eddy Cross just to get more perspectives on this issue. So do stay with us as we connect with our second guest. So I'd like to welcome Mr. Eddy Cross into the conversation. How are you and good evening?
Good evening. Sorry I'm a little bit late.
No problem. I will not fine you.
Find him. Eddie, normally not late. You'll find him.
No, I knew that he would come through, but we're so happy you're part of the conversation. So we are spelling out some of the notable changes under Statutory Instrument 76 of 2005. We've outlined the issue of validation and digitization of title deeds. The next aspect being securitization. Perhaps you could speak to our listeners about, what brought this process about. There are a lot of fears around having to hand over a title deed and what will happen next. And I think quite interesting that the only recognized format after a transitional period will be securitized deeds.
Yes. We've had, the country has experienced in recent years a lot of fraud associated with the traditional title deed. This was on ordinary bond paper. It has no security features on it. It is easily duplicated and replicated. And we found people occupying properties which they had false title deeds to, selling properties which didn't belong to them, a whole range of problems. In addition to that, the deeds office had records going right back over 100 years since the first deeds that were issued in what was then Rhodesia. And the condition of these records was appalling. There was, in the deeds office itself, there was no protection against water damage, and there was no protection against fire. Had we had a fire in the deeds office, it would have been catastrophic for the country. So the decision was taken 6 years ago to digitalize all existing title deeds. So there are about 1.3 million of these. And the process has taken 6 years. And during that time, what we did was to scan all existing title deeds that were held by the deeds office so that a digital record existed of those deeds. And then we built a system using modern IT technology, which would allow us to issue title deeds electronically in the future and to hold them in the cloud where they cannot be tampered with or touched. So the new title deed, in fact, will have a whole lot of different features. First of all, it's on special paper. It's paper which costs $2.70 per page. So people need to know that this is very special paper. It doesn't burn. You can't wet it. And in addition, it has a number of security features, some of which are visible with the naked eye and some of which are not. And it has a code, a barcode at the bottom, which in fact contains all the information relating to the property that it covers. So it tells you from the very start, from the first day that the title deed was issued up to 100 years ago, it tells you exactly who owned it, what date it was issued, what property it covered. It gives a description of the property. And in addition, it tells you what exactly happened to that property over the intervening years. And so an owner, a title deed owner today, has a complete record on this document relating to the property which he or she owns. In addition to that, we've built a system now for electronically recording any bond activity over the property. So if you bond your property in order to raise some money from a bank, that process is now recorded digitally, and it's much quicker. On top of all that, the government has decided back in 2022, that it was going to issue title to all untitled property in the country. So the Kwangu Ngakwami Presidential Title Deed Trust, which I'm a trustee, is currently working on providing title for all informal housing in all urban areas of the country. And we think this will involve nearly 2 million homes eventually. our cities are much bigger than they are recorded at, because a lot of the housing involved is informal and is located on what was formerly farmland. Then we've been asked by government to provide title to all of the long-standing leasehold property in the urban areas. In the Rhodesian days, the Rhodesian government was very reluctant to give permanent title to African or black families occupying urban land in the main cities. And all of those settlements, or the majority of them, were on leasehold arrangements. That now is being converted into full title. And then we've been asked to provide title to all rural business centres. And so this is going to be transformative. In addition to that, the government has agreed to provide title to those homes which have been built with state assistance. Some of it is flats, and they'll be given sectional title. So this is a gigantic program involving over 4 million homes and businesses, and it's going to create a huge body of property which can now be used as collateral for bank lending. It's a revolution.
It definitely is, but it also sounds like it will be a very cumbersome process. So, in following up, I think the one issue that many citizens and listeners would want to get clarity on, Eddy, is will there be a charge to the title deed holder for validation or securitization? You talked about the paper costing $2.75. Is that cost going to be borne by the title deed holder?
Yes, and the title deed holder, the person with an existing title deed will be required to go to the deeds office and make an application for the new title deed, and the cost of that is going to be about $70, which is really insignificant when you consider what's involved. If you're in a home which is currently informal and has no title, or in a leased property which now is being titled, the fee is $370. That's a $20 application fee, and then a series of charges which relate to statutory charges. $10 for the Ministry of Local Government and $20 for the local authority, and so on. In addition to that, the process is covering the cost of survey and the 21st century equipment for that. We have a centre at the University of Zimbabwe in Harare, which will provide satellite coverage for urban areas as well as drone coverage, and that's being used to provide survey services. If you had done this process 20 years ago, 10 years ago, survey would have cost you a couple of $1,000. Now it costs you perhaps $70 or $60 or something. It's relatively inexpensive. And then on top of that, you've got to pay for all the legal processes which have to go by. You've got to sign agreements in front of a lawyer, and that costs money. But I don't think that these costs are significant. And I think given the fact that you're turning property which has no value at all today into properties sometimes worth $500,000, the benefits far outweigh the cost.
I do follow, Eddy, but there's also concerns around the revised fees per the second schedule of the statutory instrument that see lodging box rental going up to $120 a year, certification of documents being $20 per document. I think search is $1, and it's quite high compared to the lower fees in the 2018 regulations. Perhaps you could justify those costs as well for our listeners who are, worrying about their pockets.
Yeah, I think there are costs involved. I've been involved since 22 when the private sector was asked to assist the government with this process. And what I can tell you is the state of the deeds office when we arrived there was absolutely appalling, because they had no money. And I think for example, for this year, the capital allocation to the deeds office was a couple of $1,000. Well, if you went into the deeds office today, the toilets aren't working, the lifts are not working. The place is a disaster, and it's now being renovated and put onto a proper. These are high security documents. These are documents. I mean, the value of all these properties is going to be something in excess of $300 billion US. $300 billion US.
That's a
It's
big
massive.
number. It's a big
It's a big
number.
And for most families, this is the most important asset that they have.
It's real property rights. I'll move on to yet another aspect just in light of our time. There's the question around someone maybe who's in the course of perhaps selling their property with their old title deed. What happens to someone like that, for example, who was maybe in the middle of a transaction, or they've surrendered their old title deed as collateral before it's gone for validation and securitization? Will that transaction be binding, or will it be rejected, and this person will have to first go through the validation and securitization of that title deed?
I don't think it will be affected at all. You can do it before or after. This process is going to take at least 5 years. So you can do it at any time during that period. And I don't think, providing your title deed is valid and it has all the necessary information on it and it can be validated by a lawyer, I don't think you have anything to worry. What you need to be worried about, if you're buying a property and it's not one of the new title deeds, the possibility is that you might be defrauded. And so what I would do if I was buying a property, I would ask the owner to go and do the necessary transition before we completed the exercise. Be cautious.
Caution, definitely err on the side of caution. And lastly, I think another burning issue. Why is there a need for title deed holders to individually come and submit the deeds? Could they not just be captured correctly from the existing system, particularly some of the older ones, that are in existence 100 years or even older than that?
Can I tell you, we have to see who these people are. We have to validate. They have to produce an ID. We have to make sure with the Registrar General. Everybody who goes through this process will be checked out by the Registrar General to make sure that the person who's claiming to own this property is in fact the legitimate owner. This is quite an exercise in a country like this. And I think everybody should be grateful that the government's put these necessary features into the system, because it really protects everybody.
Other notable changes are, of course, and I think I laud this one. I thought it was a good one. The stricter regulations or requirements for powers of attorney, for example, rules on attestation, identity proof, disability exceptions. I think these are all very good, and for the protection of anyone getting into a transaction. As we come to the end of the program, Rejoice, I will come to you for your closing reflections, and then I'll come to you, Eddy, for your closing reflections. And I think more importantly, an outline of what is to follow for citizens of Zimbabwe who hold title deeds, who were taken aback, I think, a little bit by the enactment of this statutory instrument.
Well, look, Eddy mentions a lot about low-income housing transformation. And my concern really is that whenever you talk to low-income citizens, they've always worried about the cost of title deed. In other words, the cost of transferring ownership. And I think Eddy and his team might need to relook at that and ensure that there's no obstacle in terms of this transformation. Or secondly, the issue of the stampede. I know the deed office has given us 24 months. So I think there must be a way of prompting citizens to start doing it now. As Eddy says, that if somebody is selling a property now, there must be a public announcement that you don't buy that property until it has been securitized, so that you don't fall into same trap. So I think we Komaliso is low income centric, so we're a bit concerned perhaps about the overall cost of transformation. But if it is done over a long period with part payments and support from the trust, I think it will work. But it should not be cost. Should not be an obstacle.
I hear you. Thank you so much for that, Rejoice. Eddie, coming to your closing reflections, allay the fears of all the Zimbabweans listening, and of course, just a quick outline of the next steps to follow.
Well, I think it's very important to recognize that this is the first major review of this critical aspect of national life for many, many years. And it's time that we updated the process. On the question of the cost of the title deed, the individual entering into this deal can pay for the costs over time. They can pay by cell phone, they can pay in the currency of their choice, but they can go into any branch of the bank that we're using. But most people will pay online, and I think that will enable people. And we're giving exceptions. We will allow people, for example, widows, people who simply do not have the resources to pay for this. We will make arrangements that they get their title deeds without charge. So we're trying to accommodate everybody, and it's not easy. But I tell you, for me, this is one of the most exciting developments in Zimbabwe for many, many years.
Thank you so much, Eddie. I think it's a good place for us to end the conversation. We certainly will be coming back to the both of you as the process unfolds to offer more clarity and information. But I think it's definitely something to celebrate, and the clarification was very, very important for our listeners going forward. This is for their protection, and anyone going into a potential sale, please do not go in with your eyes closed. So many thanks to my guests this evening, Eddy Cross as well as Rejoice Ngwenya. Gentlemen, thank you for your time and your insights.
The Exchange on Deep Dive.